Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. This is webinar number 3 on our Stay Connected weekly webinar series here at Aruba. We're a Hewlett-Packard enterprise company. My name is Anthony. If you've attended one of our webinars in the past, you've likely heard my voice. Very excited to be with you today, and very excited for this weekly series. Typically, our webinar series is 2 webinars a month, but we've had an opportunity to present some specific topics, industry-specific topics around healthcare, which we did last week, and 2 weeks ago, just generally talking about business continuity and how you can keep your business available to your customers and to your employees during a very difficult time. I do manage the webinar program. This is 3 years coming, and appreciate your taking the time to join us. For Education Today, what is next for schools and universities? It's a popular question. This is easily one of our most well-registered for and already attended webinars in Aruba's program, so we appreciate you joining. As I said, we kicked things off 2 weeks ago, and we're joined today by a couple of special presenters. Johan Zimmern, he's our Senior Manager of Education Solutions here at Aruba Networks, and Yona Ostibo, Solution Engineering Manager, will present. We'll look at high-level challenges facing education. Many of you are experiencing these now, and we'll also get a little bit more technical. That's some of the feedback that we've received over the first 2 webinars that we've had, is a request to get a little bit more technical on the solution and the products that can help you. Before we get to Johan and today's webinar, a couple of notes for those who are using our BrightTalk webinar platform for the first time. If you are, thank you. You'll notice there's a box underneath the slide window to answer and submit questions, or rather ask and submit questions. Please ask those questions throughout the webinar, and we'll save the questions or answers for those questions at the end. I will moderate the Q&A with Johan and Yona, and we'll answer them in the order that they came in. If we don't get to all the questions, this is something we do anyway, we'll follow up directly using the email that you use to register. So sometimes we're not able to get it, but we are going to be able to answer all the questions. If not live, then we'll do so at the end. And also, at the end of the webinar, feedback. It's extremely important. We have modified this, and already I see that some folks are experiencing some technical difficulties with the double voice. Hopefully what I just did fixed that. So thank you. Your feedback is important. So live feedback during the webinar and post-webinar feedback, you'll be prompted to give a 1 to 5 star rating. And we only ask that you be honest and give us some feedback, and there's an open comment box where you can type some feedback. So that's going to do it for my bit, and I'll join at the end for the Q&A. I'd like to introduce Johan Zimmern, our Senior Solutions Manager for Education here at Aruba Networks. Thanks for joining us today, Johan.
Thanks, Anthony, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. My name is Johan Zimmern, as Anthony said, Solutions Manager on the corporate team at Aruba, responsible for primary, secondary, and post-secondary education, also referred to as K-12 and higher education here in the United States, and I'll be using those terms throughout the presentation. I want to thank you for joining us today and hope that you're all doing well given the current circumstances. As a father of 2 college students who are in their last quarters of undergraduate studies, one in Washington State and another one, unfortunately, in New York City, and a wife who works in teacher onboarding in the San Francisco Unified School District, I'm quite well aware of all the difficulties many of you face in your workplaces. And for those of you working in education trenches, I do want to express my sincerest gratitude for the work that you do. And while healthcare workers obviously deserve the greatest thanks, I think it's educators and people like you who keep the lights on and ensure that education continues. Today's webinar will cover some of the current challenges regarding the global pandemic, and we'll review some of the immediate options for IT to address requirements for stakeholders, such as admins, staff, teachers, faculty, and most importantly, students in this most unusual of times. And before we get started, I'd like to ask some questions. I have a poll here prepared. I'd like to understand who you're representing. So let me open up the vote here. If you can just let us know whether you're working in K-12, in higher education, or combined K-20, or any other environment. And I see some votes coming in there, so please answer those questions before we move on to the next slide. I see it's a good mix of higher ed and K-12, and some of you from other environments. I hope this is useful to you as we're going through some of these subjects here. I'm going to stop the voting and go on to the agenda. So to quickly review today's agenda, I'll touch on challenges, look at current realities and efforts around change management and some of the responses we've seen in both school districts and at college and university level, and we'll have Jonah review our Aruba solutions that can address some of these challenges. And at the end, I'll point you to some resources. And as Anthony indicated at the beginning of the session, this question always comes up. We will make the deck available, we'll make the resources available, as well as the recording after the presentation. For those of you in education, you may be aware of two organizations or membership or associations called the EDUCAUSE in higher education, responsible for IT, as well as COSN, Consortium of School Networking. They are dealing with CTOs in the K-12 space. Both of these organizations every year query their membership and bring out some of the priorities and the innovations that are of importance in every year. In the last few years and before the COVID-19 crisis, security, information security, privacy, data ownership, those are the subjects that were most important. These subjects and these priorities will not go away because of the current pandemic. They may even become more important. Some of you may have heard about challenges with Zoom web conferencing around security. And they're not the only ones, but anything that's now happening in the education technology space is obviously being scrutinized as we move forward. Some of it has to take a back seat as we address some more urgent challenges, but I think it's important to keep our eye on what these priorities were as they will come back to move into the following year. When we look at the overall situation with COVID-19 on a global scale, we now have, according to the UNESCO data that I pulled on the weekend, we have over 188 countrywide school closures, schools and universities. 90% or more of all learners globally are impacted. That's equating to over 1.5 billion students. It's just a staggering number. Countries like the US, Canada, Russia, Australia have decided to leave some of these school closure decisions to the states, but it's quite staggering. When you look at higher education, most institutions have closed their campuses. All of the student housing is closed for the most part, and classes have moved online. Both my kids are now required to study online for the rest of the semester. Now, in higher education, most universities and colleges were semi-prepared and have dabbled in e-learning and virtual delivery of classes for some time now. So that move was not as difficult as it has been in K-12 education. When schools were ordered to close in mid-March, some schools decided to continue education, some schools decided to move learning online, but most districts were utterly unprepared for just the staggering size of the transition and moving all classes, all grade levels onto online learning. So quite a challenge, to say the least. When we look at these challenges in more detail, number one has been access for devices, access for internet access at home, coupled with the proper support to help students continue learning as quickly as possible. And with new teaching methodologies comes obviously an evolving instruction requirement, which requires professional development, other training, technical training. Teachers need to change how they think about pedagogy, class management, and successful content delivery. And lastly, schools and colleges need to review their plans for classes and events that previously required physical attendance. What are we doing about a CTE course in car mechanic? How do we deal with science labs, practicing sports, or attending graduation? Everything needs new approaches. My daughter was just told that her graduation that was scheduled for June 12th was canceled and will move online. So a challenge overall that continues to require a lot of different approaches. And with that, I have a second question and want to find out from you of what your biggest concerns are in your environment. If you can give me your vote on that. Questions around, is it device access, is it internet access, is it secure remote connectivity, or is it around ensuring government mandated compliances? Unfortunately, the system in BrightTalk does not allow for all that applies, so just pick the one that you think is the most important and most urgent challenge in your environment. And I see it's the secure remote connectivity and the device access are most important. Obviously, internet access for students frequently a challenge as well. I'm going to close that poll over here, move to the next slide. So what have we seen in today's reality? All of the classes are moving online, and what are the disconnected students to do? How do we deal with the digital divides? A lot of students, especially in rural and underserved communities, are not able to access. And why should it have taken the pandemic to expose this internet inequality among U.S. students? Nope, I need to find my slide here. Wi-Fi has become an absolute necessity, especially with in K-12, everyone moving Chromebooks. They no longer have Ethernet ports on the devices. Got to provide Wi-Fi access. And according to the most recent federal data, about 14% of households with school-aged children do not have any internet access. Most of those are in households that make less than $50,000 a year, and many live in rural areas. The National Telecommunications and Information Administration estimates that approximately 7 million school-aged children live in households without internet. And some reports have this number as high as 12 million, which would equate to nearly a fifth of all students in K-12. So let's talk about how schools and colleges have tried to address this in the immediacy of this decision to close schools. Here in San Francisco, schools have been closed for about 4 weeks since March 16th, and we are expecting them to stay closed and remain closed through the end of the school year. So access and security of access has been one of the first questions, obviously. Having students learn from home means they are on their own device in most cases. They are on an unsecured wireless network, and none of that can be centrally managed. And there's a lot of concerns around compliance with SIPA and FERPA and COPPA compliance, web filtering, all of the things that you can provide within the school environment, you can suddenly no longer provide as students are logging in from home. The other issue is bandwidth. As family members are all working from home, spouses, children, family of 4 or 5 in a single environment have to get online. They all work. They all need bandwidth. And according to the FCC, they recommended minimum of 25 megabits per second for any advanced usage that includes video conferencing, VoIP calls, and streaming HD video or other learning content. To facilitate remote learning, educators need the right teaching tools, a functioning LMS and a student information system for starters. They need the right tech if they want to include synchronous teaching, which a lot of teachers would like to do, but frequently can't because of access and device availability. And lastly, we're looking at professional development. If your teachers and your faculty members have not taught online, how do you get them up and running quickly? How do you teach online? What's the pedagogy around it? And how do you manage, how do you deal with class management? There was a report from EDUCAUSE just this week around students reporting of their experience online, and it's everything from students not wearing proper clothing or no clothing at all in Zoom meetings. There's the Zoom bombing stories that have been coming out. So the challenges are multifold, and attendance has been incredibly low, both in K-12 and higher ed, when you look at the students that need to be coming into the classes and eventually are not making it for whatever reason. In the response to all of these challenges, we've seen several different approaches. From a device perspective, it's been free or loaner devices. Districts provide them directly. Some companies have jumped in and helped out with devices. On the internet service side, you've seen everything from Comcast to Charter to Spectrum and others providing, at least for the near future, free or low cost access. School districts and universities are handing out personal hotspots, which can be helpful. However, if you don't have cellular connectivity in your remote area, that may not work either. And again, no security built and no central management built into the personal hotspots. An alternative, and something that we want to talk about specifically today, has been around providing secure access through parking lot environments. Both universities and school districts are allowing parents, students to access the internet via secure Wi-Fi outdoors and continue to keep social distancing in place as they're entering parking lots. We also see mobile bus and vehicle Wi-Fi provided that can move into environments and communities where internet is not available. So if you've read the news, you've probably seen what's happening in your neighborhood: free Wi-Fi buses, parking lot access, a lot of different ideas in how to make sure that we can continue to provide access to our students in the right place. Interestingly enough here, the last item on the bottom right-hand side is that the university is offering EduRoam, which is a global Wi-Fi SSID that allows students from anywhere with a credential to log on securely and take advantage of the EduRoam access. I think I have one last question for you before I move on. I'll go back to the list. There's been some news around funding for the CARES Act that's coming out. There's some $30 billion for both K-12 and higher education coming down the pipe. Be interesting to hear from those of you involved in education to understand where you want to place the majority of your focus as this financial funding is coming down. I know half of it in higher education has to be applied to providing students with assistance, especially students who've been kicked out of their dormitory environments. But please feel free to answer those questions. I'm hoping that's coming through there. Don't know yet. Lots of don't know yet. Wi-Fi expansion hotspots seems to be the second item here, and some devices for students as well. So that's great. Thank you for that. And with that, I want to talk about two areas before I hand this off to Jona to talk about the details of the technical implementation. So we've talked about providing access through community means in parking lots outside of universities and school districts and individual schools, and then the mobile Wi-Fi application. And then lastly, talk a little bit more about how we support remote learning and working from home in a secure manner, and talk about our remote access points. So with that, let me pass the baton over to my colleague, Jona Ostebo. And Jona, it's all yours.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, thank you.
Yes, we can. Loud and clear. Thanks.
Perfect, thank you. All right, I'm Jona Ostebo. I'm part of Aruba's technical marketing team, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the remote access opportunities we have, and also some of the focuses that we have seen from the education field lately. So the first thing I'll dive into, and I cover just briefly, is what we can do with Wi-Fi in parking lots or outdoor areas. Several school districts have been requesting a wireless network to be able to support those who don't have internet access at home. What they're doing is to extend the wireless network from the school building out to the parking lot or parks where they can have students sitting in cars and make sure they have good enough physical distance, the social distance that is needed. Let's see. I clicked too much forward. So to do that, we have several different products that we can use to help out with that. Here are AP370 series. So AP375, the one most to the left. It's then we have different with external antennas, and we also have directional. And I'll come back to that in a bit. We have the low-cost series, 365, 367. They are similar, but just shorter range and more affordable. we have AP387. That's kind of unique access point. That's point-to-point using 60 gigahertz to make sure we get highest capacity. And it's not to connect to any mobile devices, but it would be typically from a school building to maybe there's a small shed on a parking lot where they can connect normal APs to it. So I'll come back to that as well. And lastly, we have the new AP 575, 574, 577 that is coming out pretty soon. They will not be able to ship today, but for those that are doing expansion and planning this upgrade in the future, this is something to look at. This will be a full Wi-Fi 6 capable access point and all certified. So not enough about the specific products. Some of the solutions we are looking into is and that we are supporting is the one use case where you can have the access point mounted directly on the wall of the building, pointing towards the parking lot. When you're using those access points, you can easily get distances with 500-600 feet away from the wall if it's free line of sight. And of course, when you have several, if there's several cars or buses or vans parked there, that might block the signal. The idea then will be either to mount it higher up on the wall of the building, so it's pointing downwards and going above some of the cars. That's one thing. The other option is to extend this to light poles and use APs mounted above the cars. One of the challenges you might be facing if you're going to extend it to the light poles is the physical distance. A normal Cat5e or Cat6 Ethernet cable can only be used for 100-meter distance, approximately 330 feet. So if you're using an extender, that can be a small switch, it can be an Ethernet extender, or it can be an Ethernet media converter being placed at the base of that light pole. Then you might be using fiber optics to the light pole and copper Ethernet cable up to the access point. Or in some cases also, you can use access point with fiber optics cable going all the way up to the access point and with power cable as well into the access point. They are both useful solutions. One of the challenges with that could be the security aspect. But thankfully, the Aruba architecture is encrypting the whole traffic end-to-end from the mobile device, being a laptop or being a Chromebook or your cell phone or whatever you're using, all the way into the data center. That means even if there is an active component in the base of the light pole, that component will not be able to look into any of the packages or any of the private or sensitive information that's being transferred. So it's still safe. Another thing we're looking into is mobile Wi-Fi. In this scenario where there are not parking lots nearby the school and not enough parking capacity, there have been some campaigns where we, with partners, have been looking into what we can do to help in those areas where they need to get close to their homes. What we were doing there is placing one or more access points on a bus, and those access points will be connected, having an uplink back to the school. That can be via a mesh link using one or more, or two or more of our access points. They can be cascaded or can be with one or multiple hop with redundancy. We can use LTE data over AT&T or Verizon or whoever should be the vendor you might be preferring, or we can use our AP387 as a radio link. The AP387 can do full gigabit speed, similar like the wired speed, up to a distance of approximately close to half a mile. And even if it's bad weather, there will be some degradation, but it will never stop since we're using both 5 gigahertz and 60 gigahertz at the same time for that specific purpose. The next thing I will spend a little bit more time on is to talk about from home. How can we support either students or education staff or teachers working from home. We have several different remote access solutions. We have our branch gateways. We're not going to talk about that right now, where we can manage about the firewall and access points and switches and all of that. We have IPVPN, that is our architecture where you need a remote building where you need more than one access point. We have a RAP architecture, remote access point. That's what I'm going to highlight and talk most about now. The other thing we have that's also an opportunity is to use our VIA remote VPN platform. When you're using VIA, you will be using, you'll install software on your mobile device. They can be for either Windows or Mac, Android, your iPhone, iPad, or Chromebook, or Linux. So we're supporting basically most of the operating systems out there. But right now, let's focus on the RAP and let's dive into that. One key thing is every single Aruba access point can be used as a RAP. But for a lot of people, you don't have any. For a lot of people, you don't have any PoE at home to power the normal wall-mounted or ceiling-mounted access points. But our RAPs are dedicated access point that comes with, they can be ordered with a desk stand as well, or they can be wall-mounted. So these are specific for this use case. If we start with the 203R on the left, the 203R is a desktop model, and it has a normal 110 volt plug in, so you don't need any external power brick. You can also, you will have one Ethernet cable for your cable modem or your internet access, and there's also one extra Ethernet port available. So for those that need to have a voice over IP desk phone as an example, you can use the wired Ethernet port for that, and you can actually, with the P option, you can use, you can get power over Ethernet out to your phone, so the IP is powering the phone as well. All of these access points also support using USB LTE modems. So if you don't have a wired internet at home, you can use a USB LTE modem and get the internet through that. Certainly then you will be able to use that and get internet access for those devices that do not support LTE. So if you're looking at it 303H as the most sold access point in this case, 100 megabyte wire crypto, which is good if you need to transfer big documents over wire port. If you're using the wireless, the capacity will be more, and I'll talk about that in a bit. And these AP also have several Ethernet ports out that can be used for printers and other devices. So a little bit more about the architecture behind this. Like I mentioned when I talked about our outdoor, the traffic is encrypted end-to-end from your mobile device into the mobility controller that's located in a data center somewhere. There can be a physical mobility controller, there can be a virtual mobility controller. Both of them works perfectly fine. If you as an employee are connecting to the school STD or a student, your traffic is then fully tunneled all the way back to the mobility controller. It's going through our content filter and out to the internet. So if we think about a quick use case here, if an employee is working or student is spending 8 hours a day on a premise, an example, the way we normally work before, and then 2 hours a day at home. If you don't have RAP, 20% of the time, that student or employee is exposed to threats from the internet and have access to also all kind of internet things that you might want to block in with your content filter. Things are not healthy for that individual. Now that we're working using a RAP, if you're putting a RAP at home, you will then maybe be 8 hours in the office and 2 hours at home. Instead of having the 2 hours at home being without any filter, all those 10 hours a day will be behind filter. Now that in the situation where we are right now, we have most of the kids spending most of the time at home. Most of the employees from schools spending most of the time at home working over their normal internet access. And in many cases, they are not behind any firewalls, no content filter, and they're exposed to threats from the internet 80–90% of the time, which is an unhealthy situation for their computer. With the WRAP, we have the ability to have several SSIDs. So, like school SSID, when you open the laptop and it will auto-connect like if it was in the office, same SSID, no difference, exactly same security, all is handled the same. You can also have both wired and wireless phone SSID if you need to have that separate. And you can also have a home SSID, so you can provide everything in one device. And even have a printer connected that you're using both for your work device and also for your private devices. To get these devices deployed, we're using something called zero-touch provisioning. When you are shipping out those devices, the device gets plugged in your home or someone's home. The device will automatically contact the internet, contact our Aruba cloud, and it will check, say, who do I belong to? Based on shipping information and who we have sold that to, we know it belongs to customer ABC. When customer ABC have created their one-time that this is the default behavior from new devices belonging ABC, they'll be told to connect to the campus and create an IP system, and it's up running automatically. So it's a fully zero-touch provisioning. All right, I think that's it for what I should talk about, and I'm going to put it over back to Johan.
Thanks, Yona. That was excellent, and I've seen a lot of questions coming through. I'm not sure if we're going to address all of them, but Anthony will present some of those questions to you. I think a lot of them are technical in nature. But just to summarize our presentation of today, we talked about outdoor and mobile APs for use in parking lots and in mobile vehicles. And it doesn't have to be a school bus. Clearly, school buses just seem to be available in most school districts. Remote access points for home use and home security. The ability to access content, learning management systems, and things behind firewalls is obviously important. My sister in Germany is employed at a state museum, and she currently is working from home, but cannot get to some of the internal data components because there is no VPN solution, there is no remote access point, and it's quite frustrating for her to not be able to access that. So a great solution on that front. And Yona briefly talked about our virtual intranet access client, our VIA client that can sit on just about any OS and help your student, faculty, and staff access the internal site. So with that, let me briefly point to some resources. And again, this presentation will be made available to you, so you'll be able to click through afterwards. We have attached to this presentation today, and I think there should be a link on the bottom of your page to the content. We have an at a glance anywhere education PDF. And I briefly want to talk about some of the efforts that Aruba is doing on the healthcare side. Aruba has decided to donate some $50 million in components and software and licensing for rapid response programs. A lot of universities obviously have associated healthcare facilities and can apply to this program. So if you're in higher ed, if you're related to healthcare and you need assistance, there's a whole program, and I've attached information about it. There's also a community-based aspect to that. There's an Airheads community of Aruba engineers and support personnel. There's over 100,000 of them in our community today, and you can register to volunteer if you're interested in helping out with any healthcare-related implementations. And lastly, some of you, especially here in the US, are interested in E-Rate and the CARES Act funding that's coming down. A lot of it is still questionable. It's unclear exactly of what qualifies for what purchase and for what purpose. But if you have any questions relating to E-Rate, please send them to erate@hpe.com, and we'll get to you. And then lastly, we do have websites that have information about both higher education and K-12 solutions. So don't hesitate to stop by. And with that, I'm going to slide one more forward. We're going to move to our Q&A sections, and I'll pass it back to Anthony.
Perfect. Thank you, Johan and Jonah. We have received quite a few questions, so we're going to do the best we can to get through all of them. But typically we don't spend 25 minutes on Q&A. So there will be some questions that we can't answer, and we will follow up directly with you either through a phone call or an email. But let's go ahead and get started. This was the first question we received, and it says, with regard to Eduroam, we are planning to implement that. Currently, we have Aruba Wi-Fi infrastructure. Is there any sets of recommendations or suggestions for Eduroam deployment?
So I'll take that. That's an easy one. There are no big challenges with that. The key thing is we recommend that you're doing Eduroam to your own radio server, of course preferable ClearPass, and you'll create a service rule on ClearPass to forward that to Eduroam. So it is a quick configuration that is done in just a few minutes and should be working right out of the box, basically.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for that question. And you can still ask your questions. Just go to the Ask a Question box underneath the Q&A slide in your BrightTalk console. Click that, type in your question, and submit it, and we'll see if we can get to it. We have quite a few to get to before that, but here's another one, and this is probably for Jonah. So AP387, how far can you connect point to point?
So our data sheet is saying 400 meters, so about 1,200 feet. That said, we have been doing a lot of testing in way longer distances. So basically, we have normally said that 600 to 800 meters in good conditions. But as soon as the distance is getting longer, the top speed will go down a bit. So the access point has a 2.5 gig radio. So and the max speed we are getting out of it is 2.5 gig on the radio side. The limitation then is the Ethernet port. And when you're getting down, if you're getting to maybe 800 meters, this is guessing, and of course also weather has a little bit of impact. You might be getting 500 meg, but not 4 gigabits, but still it should be doable to go way further than 400 meters.
All right. Thanks for that, Jonah. You talked a little bit about parking lot Wi-Fi. The question is, how successful are mesh network deployments? Mesh is attractive because it doesn't require the UTP fiber connection out to each light pole. So the question is, regarding the parking lot Wi-Fi, how successful are mesh network deployments?
Mesh is okay if you have few hops, but I would never recommend go several hops on it. And that's, I'll rather than go back to and recommend if it's just point to point to extend it from the building out to an area. There I'll do the 387. Or if you're doing mesh, if you can have mesh to several APs, then you can have AP 377 or 375 on the wall pointing out to on 375 out there, and that should work. But it's not if you're trying to extend it from pole to pole to pole in a long line. That's not good. And for every additional hop you're adding, you are halving the capacity.
Okay. Here's one, I think related. Do you know how they are powering the mobile Wi-Fi solution? Are they using extension cords, generators, batteries? How are they doing that?
You can actually do all of it. So one thing you think of is the access point is only using about 30 watts. And if you're using a battery, even with battery power, and one 12-volt battery that is 70 amps, which is typically in a normal car today, that battery will have close to 700 watts. And if you divide that onto one AP using 30 watts, you have quite many hours just to power that. So you should be fine with batteries, but if you are going to stay there for a very long time, they should consider a small generator as well.
Sure. Jonah, is there any use case for BLE for wrap at home?
For sure. I was on a chat just this morning with a partner in the US that are doing healthcare, and what they're actually using the BLE sensor in the wrap at home to sense when people are walking into the home. So basically, this is healthcare where they're monitoring. They know that the older person they are monitoring is actually back home, and also with the situation where we are right now, it might be a situation where they're monitoring home service nurses or those kind of things. They're actually seeing that this person is at home. Maybe this is the thing to actually know that the kid is at home and not outside playing football. So there are a lot of opportunities that can be used for BLE in the home for the future.
Right. Okay. I'll mark that one. So thanks for the questions. We're going through them as quickly as we can here. Here's one from, well, it doesn't say who it's from, but can campus APs such as AP 225 or the 345 be used as a remote access point or a wrap?
Yes, they can.
That's easy.
It's easy to convert them.
Okay, and if for tips on how to convert, is there a place that we should send someone who maybe Jonah doesn't have experience doing that, or give them some idea on where to get more information?
So these are so the 345 is a UAP, so there it's easy to onboard them. One thing is to use the zero touch provisioning for 345, but if you're doing it manually, if there's a new AP coming up, it comes up with the set me up SSID. You connect to that and you choose convert to wrap and to type in the host name or the IP address of your VPN concentrator, and it will install conversion right away. If it's a 225, that's older AP. There you need to whitelist the access point. Actually, you need to do that with both scenarios. You need to whitelist the access point. On the 225, there are two commands you need to do on CLI. One is convert to wrap, and the other one is reboot. So I'm pretty sure that is listed on our community forum. If not, they can also be, if that is connected to your network on a campus network, you can easily provision directly from the controller as well. Okay,
perfect. Here's a question that came through, and I have a feeling this will be something that we follow up directly with the person who asked the question. We do have webinar attendees from around the world, and this looks like it's coming from Latin America. It says, even though most schools in LATAM do not usually have parking lots, I'd love to work with you in a solution for some city-owned parking lots for people with no internet access and no mobility. Would you agree, Jonah, that's a follow-up question, that one that we should take individually? Because the question is, what would you suggest in that type of a situation?
Yeah, this
for
is
sure.
I think we'll take that offline. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And Johan, we've had a few questions here about the availability of some of the access points currently. Can you address that, or would you be able to address that?
Yeah, I think I can address that. I mean, just like any other technology company right now, there's supply chain interruptions that have cost both the reps that are highly in demand for not just education institutions, but also regular businesses. So we are ramping up as fast as we humanly can. It is obviously in our interest to supply all of our channel partners as well as our customers with these as fast as we can. So stay tuned on that. I don't have an immediate update as to where it stands today. There is a small back order as far as I am aware of, and then we'll reach out to you separately after this webinar to indicate where that stands. But rest assured, we have every intention to fulfill these orders as quickly as we humanly can.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And in full transparency, we do have some questions on here about just how many access points are on back order or backlogged. We can't, I mean, that's something that's a daily number. So if we were to give a number now, it's likely not a correct number. So
highly fluctuating. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So I appreciate the questions, though, and that is a concern, and thanks, Johan, for answering that one. Here's one. I have a 305 303H AP configured on an on-prem Airwave solution 8.2.10.1. Can I convert some APs to wraps, or will I need a mobility controller? I can read it again if you want, Jonah. But basically the question was, this person has a 305 and a 303H AP. It's configured on-prem Airwave, and wants to know if they can convert some of the APs to wraps, or does this person need a mobility controller?
So they will need a mobility controller or a virtual mobility controller to terminate the VPN to. I don't know if they only have the Airwave and the IPs, or if they have anything else, but there needs to be some form of VPN concentrator in there. Either they can be the smallest controller from Aruba, or it can be a large one depending on the need. All of them have the same functionality, it's just different scalability. And they can also look into using a virtual controller.
Okay, perfect. Here's one. Thanks. We are planning to participate both as IDP and SP. We have ClearPass as Radius. Is it advisable to broadcast Eduroam in place of guest wireless LAN SSID? So there's a lot of acronyms in there, Jonah.
Yeah. Yes. I would broadcast Eduroam all over, but Eduroam doesn't replace guest, because you have quite many people on-prem and that might not have an Eduroam account. There might be parents visiting, it might be consultants, people coming in, and so on. So Eduroam is an addition to all the other things, I would say.
Okay. All right. Here's another one, Eduroam related. I understand that Eduroam's config is easy with ClearPass. Where should I go, or who should I speak with to have more information about that? Is there a resource that we can get this person connected to?
His or her local SE and the partner.
Okay. And is there anything online, like a guide or any type of ClearPass document?
I don't think there's anything on Eduroam specifically, but I can do some research, and we can get back to this particular person afterwards. Yeah.
So Eduroam is basically just another radio server. So I think there are things in ClearPass that might be covering how to set up ClearPass proxying, and that is what this needed.
Okay, perfect. Here's a question: where can I find mobility controller models available?
It is on arubanetwork.com. There's a long list of all different controllers and scalability, from our 7005 model that can handle 16 access points up to our 9000 and up to our 7280 that can handle several thousand access points.
Yeah, and if the question is about availability, is reach out to your channel partner and talk to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We have one more here, and I think this is probably a direct follow-up. Are there any known issues with the 303H and the cluster architecture?
And that's a good question. And there are no known issues with that specific AP. And one thing I did not cover in my slide deck is all our architecture with remote access APs are fully supported with clustering. So that means that you can have hitless failover and have your access point connect back to several controllers, and you can do live upgrade of your controllers without causing the APs to be down for long time and so on. So it's, those things are fully supported with cluster.
Perfect. Okay, that is the question. That is the question set for the Q&A, and I appreciate everyone who asked the questions. Your questions were insightful. Thank you. You know, this is the third in our weekly Stay Connected webinar series on business continuity. As I said, typically we do webinars at Aruba twice a month, but we've put these together once a week to try and give you a nice flavor whether it's industry-specific healthcare and education or just from a general perspective on business continuity for your business. If you'd like to see past webinars, maybe you missed them, or look and see what's coming up, we invite you to visit the arubanetworks.com homepage. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see a webinars link in the menu. Go ahead and click that. It'll take you to the page to watch those past webinars on demand or register to attend future webinars. And feedback. Some of you have already given feedback on the webinar. Thank you. Once the webinar concludes, you'll be prompted to rate the webinar and let us know why you rated us, what you did, in an open comment box. Please do. We appreciate it, and it helps us improve each of these webinars every time we go out. Thanks to Johan and Jonah for joining us today. We also want to thank you for attending, and I'm willing to bet we're not the only company doing webinars, so we appreciate you carving out some time and joining us today. Thank you very much. This concludes today's webinar. Until next time, please have a great day.